Good evening. Well, it was a very good turnout tonight. Just going to repeat the story of how myself and Dr. Geck met. I was feeling kind of crummy one night, hopped on my bicycle, drove down the hill, and I see this guy coming out of a locked church. And I says, "What is he doing in our church that's locked?" Had he broken in? It turns out he had come to another meeting, Divine Mercy meeting? Divine Will meeting, and they were canceled, but the door was open for them, so when he came out, the doors were already locked. So he was a legit guy, and we were having a conversation out there, and I shared with him my new medical condition, and he says, "Oh, I know a little bit about that." Before you know it, we've got it booked for a talk here at Holy Spirit. So that's how we met, and that's how this night came about, and I sure hope it's of value to all of us. So let's welcome Dr. Dan Geck.
Can everybody hear me okay without the mic? Yeah. No? Can I hear no's? Is this better? Wow.
Take the whole thing off.
There you go. All right. Boy, my hands are full. So, Father John, thank you so much. Father John was so welcoming. I went to this prayer meeting. The meeting was canceled, but then we had a chance to talk, Father John and I. And I've been giving talks on diabetes and healthcare for a number of years. And so it just sounded like a really good fit for me to come here and talk about this with you. I am very passionate about healthcare, and there's a number of reasons why. Would anybody here say that there's some problems with our healthcare system? Would anybody, even if just small problems, would anybody agree with small problems? Just small problems at least. And I'm passionate about healthcare. And this started for me when I was 6, 7 years old. Because I remember my mom waking me up to go to school, and I was so exhausted I could not get out of bed. I was in 1st or 2nd grade, and every day was like this. Like if you've ever had the flu and you're zapped from your energy, that's how I felt all the time. And I didn't understand that this was not normal. All I knew was that I couldn't wait until 12th grade when I could graduate and I'd never have to deal with that ever again. So I waited fervently for 12 years to be able to stop school and finally not have this problem. But the problem went on throughout, my younger years, and I just mustered through everything. I mustered through life, through school, through jobs, through all of these things. And then finally, when I became a senior in high school, the bottom just fell out. Like my energy just crashed to the floor. Everything was effort. So I would get up and go to work. I worked at this Italian restaurant called Nancy's Italian Restaurant in Toledo, Ohio. It was this fine, fancy restaurant. It was beautiful. They had the entire grill line was spread out right in front of where everybody was sitting. There was a plexiglass window, and I was the pizza chef. And we had a fireplace that we made. So we made the fire, and we cooked the pizzas in the fireplace. So it was a beautiful setting. And so we had to make the fire when I first got there. We put the pizzas in and turned the pizza so it cooked evenly on all the sides. But every day that I got there, I was so exhausted, I was always behind. So I'm making pizzas in front of me, and I'm forgetting about what's in the oven, so they're burning on one side, they look raw on the other side, I'm behind on all my orders, and the servers are not happy, the manager is not happy, nobody's happy, and eventually I just had to quit. I had to leave the job. And I eventually got a job at UPS. And at UPS, it was this big, in Toledo, Ohio, was this huge hub there. And everybody from the Midwest, if you're going on I-80, these trucks are transporting 3 trailers at a time. And so this was the hub that sent out to all these different areas in Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. And so my job was somebody would unload the trucks and all the boxes would come in. My job was to look at the zip code and put it on the proper belt behind me. Well, inevitably, every single night I was so behind, the boxes would come like an avalanche. They were falling off the conveyor belts onto the steel mesh floor. We had to stop the belts, let me catch up. Like this was a daily occurrence. So I quit that job. And then I decided I'm gonna go to college. And you have to take your ACT exams. So I sit down for my ACT exams, and sure enough, on page 1, I fall asleep during the exam. Now, this was my life. I was always quitting things or falling asleep or having to move to something new. Now, if you've lived with some kind of condition your entire life, sometimes you don't know that it's not normal. But at this point, I knew that something was not normal, because it's not normal to fall asleep all the time. I would be at rafting trips, on a whitewater rafting trip, falling asleep. So something was clearly wrong. So I went to a doctor's office, looking for help. And I would challenge some of you to think about this, because most people, they get sick in slow, steady paces, right? So the symptoms come on very, very slowly. So what I see, I've been in practice now for almost 20 years, and we'll deal with people with knee pain, people who can't sleep at night, people who have trouble with digestion, all these different issues, but it all happens slowly. And there's this underlying theme that goes on. It's like people go through their whole life, and they raise their kids move out, and finally the kids move out and they're having grandkids, and you have all these aspirations, things that you love to do, but all of a sudden this knee pain that's been nagging you just gets worse. And it gets to the point where you can't run like you used to. So you used to love to jog or play tennis, and you stop doing that thing. You stop that hobby that you love. And you love to watch your kids play baseball, but you can't sit in the stadium anymore, so you stop doing that. And you used to have a 2-story house, but now you can't get up the stairs well, so you move to a different house, without a basement, without an upstairs. And you used to like to go and take trips and go to Disney World, but you can't sit in a car for more than an hour, so you stop traveling. And I see people come in and their lives literally get smaller and smaller and smaller as time goes on, and pretty soon you're living in 2 bedrooms in a house, and that's it. And life is not supposed to be like that. We're not designed that way. We're designed to heal ourselves and be healthy for our entire lives. So I guess luckily for me, it hit me so hard that I was motivated to get help. So I went to the doctor's office, and they drew a whole list of tests. Do you have any idea what they found on those tests? Anybody have any guesses?
Nothing.
You guys know. Yeah, nothing was wrong. They found nothing wrong. Everything came back completely normal.
It's normal.
That's right, everything's normal. Which some people say, hey, well, glad everything is normal. I wasn't glad, because I was miserable. I wanted them to find something. So then my doctor grabs a pad of paper, writes on it, and hands me a slip. And what do you think was on that slip of paper?
Prescription.
You got it, right. Now, here I was, 19 years old. I thought she was writing me a paper to get more tests, because they didn't find anything wrong. But it wasn't a paper to get more tests. It was a prescription for Prozac. Now, I didn't know what Prozac was, but I was confused, because the first thing she said to me was, we found nothing wrong. The second thing she said is, here, take Prozac. So if you don't know what the problem is, what are you solving? So I was confused. Has anybody experienced that? Yes?
Yeah.
Some of you raise your hand. It's like, you got blood pressure, you go in and they give you the drug for the blood pressure. Cholesterol, you take the drug for the cholesterol. You got the stomach pain, you take drugs for the stomach pain. That's just how the system works. Am I wrong?
No.
Right. So here's the problem. We have a system of healthcare that is centered around drugs to reduce symptoms. And when the drugs stop working, then what do you get?
More drugs.
More drugs.
Different
right.
drug.
And of all that, then all of a sudden, now you're looking at surgery. You see, it's a drug and surgery system. And so this is what confused me. And at first I thought, well, maybe there's something wrong with my doctor. Maybe it's the doctor is the problem. And after all these years, I can tell you the doctor's not the problem. In fact, the doctors are extremely smart. And a lot of them, I know a lot of doctors, they're very witty, they're very funny, they're very smart. They know a lot of things, but they spend 8 years in school learning how to do what? Write prescriptions. And then they spend 4 years in residency doing what? Writing prescriptions. And then when they are done with residency, they're put into a system that's all about just giving drugs and surgery for symptoms. And so how do you fight your way out of that? So just when we talk about healthcare in this country, just indulge me for a couple minutes. Would you say, if we compare today to, say, 70 years ago, do we have more or less heart disease today than we did 70 years ago? We have more, that's right. Do we have more or less cancer?
More.
More. How about obesity?
More.
Diabetes?
More.
Autism?
More.
Alzheimer's?
More.
Right? Digestive problems?
More.
Chronic pain? Autoimmune? You see the pattern here? We have more of all of these things. Do we have more or fewer drugs today than we did 70 years ago? How about surgeries?
More.
Procedures, research, technology. So what you're saying is we have more drugs, surgeries, and technology today than we've ever had before. And yet we still have more heart disease, diabetes, autism, Alzheimer's, more dementia, more diabetes, more chronic pain and obesity. You see the problem here? So this is, would you agree we have a healthcare crisis in this country? Right. That is the crisis. So when we talk about what do we do about this crisis, think about this for a minute. Before I get to this, there are some good things about our healthcare system, aren't there? Can you think of anything?
It's theirs.
That's it. That's all I can think of. No, I'm kidding. There's a couple good things. Like my dad, he had a heart attack 4 years ago. And we called up the emergent care. And they came out, they had everything ready to go. They had an ambulance that came out to his house. They poked him full of needles. And they had drugs ready to go. They saved his life enough to drive him to the urgent care. And then at the urgent care, they had all the greatest scans, all the best technology. And they were able to say, there's an artery in the back of your heart that's blocked. That's the problem. And guess what? We have the surgery available. It's just 12 miles down the road, and we can transport you there. And they transported him 12 miles down the road, and they called up a doctor who was on call, who knew how to do the surgery. And they put all these wires in his arteries and fished around to that artery and blew it up and put that blockage out of the way. And all of that technology saved his life. And I'm grateful for that. And my family's grateful for that. You're all grateful for that. But let's be honest, that isn't health care. That's not health care. That's crisis management. And there's a difference between managing a crisis and making somebody healthy. So if your house catches fire, you're going to call up the fire department, and they're going to come out with their crisis tools. They've got axes and fire hoses, and they're going to chop through to get to the source of the fire, and they're going to flood it with water to put out the fire, and then they leave. And if they got there in time and everything went well, they'll save the life of your house. But the next day, what are you going to use to rebuild that house? You're not going to use axes and fire hoses again, because those are the crisis tools. You can't rebuild the house with axes and fire hoses. And neither can you rebuild the body with drugs and surgery. But that's what healthcare is based on today. It's based on drugs and surgery, which is perfect if you have a crisis. But we can't act like everything is a crisis. Do you know 90% of all the health problems in this country are chronic problems? They're not crisis. Is heart disease chronic or crisis?
Chronic.
Chronic. It ends in a crisis, doesn't it? Diabetes ends in a crisis, but it's chronic. Obesity, arthritis, dementia, digestive problems. All of these things are all chronic illnesses, but we're treating them with what?
More medication.
Meds, crisis tools, right? So that's what we need to change. So let me ask you this. When you see this plant, right now guys, don't say throw it away. What's the first thing you think of when you see this plant right here?
Needs
Wilting
water.
plant. Maybe it needs some water. That's right. What else would you think?
Different soil.
Different soil, like fertilizer, nutrition. What else would you say? Sunshine. See, you guys got it all down. So water, sunlight, and nutrients. You know that this plant, if it's wilting, it may need something. There's something that it's missing. And if you put that in, that plant can revive itself and get healthy. Now what if you're giving it, Nancy, you're giving it all the water, the sunlight, and the nutrients, and then when you turn your back, I pour a little motor oil in that soil. How much sunlight's going to fix that? So there's two things you need to think about when you're doing natural health care, real holistic health care. First, you have to give the things that are missing, and second, you have to take away the things that are interfering with it. It's that simple, isn't it? I've shown this picture to hundreds of people, and not one person has ever said to me, Dr. Geck, that plant looks sick. I think it needs some drugs. Because intuitively, you know that that's not what fixes this. But however, if you go in and you have high blood pressure, you get the drug, right? And you can take that drug faithfully every day for 5 years. And then one day, if you get up and you don't take that drug, what happens to your blood pressure? Goes up. You can take it faithfully every day for 15, 20 years. And the day you stop taking it, what happens? So is it fixing the problem, or is it just covering up the symptom? It's a Band-Aid, right? So what we need to remember is the body is designed to heal itself. And it will always do the best thing that it's supposed to do unless something gets in the way of it. Then it must go take a different pathway. And that's where symptoms and disease comes in. So let's talk about what is health. Now this is a funny question. You know, a lot of people think health is about, well, how would you define health? Does anybody want to throw something out there?
Feeling good.
Feeling good, right? What else?
Body functions acting normally.
Normal body functions, right? So a lot of people say, if you feel good, you're healthy. And that's smart, right? You should feel good. But the problem is we all know somebody, right, who feels good, but then they had some kind of cancer going on in their life, and they didn't know it was there, right? So what is health? It's not just the absence of disease. It's actually optimum physical, social, and mental well-being, and spiritual well-being. So in other words, health is you have well-being. It's not just the absence of something. And I want to spend some time on this. So that's Dorland's Medical Dictionary. Webster's Medical Dictionary. Health is the state of sound body or mind, not simply freedom from disease or pain. In other words, like we just said, health is about having all of the parts of your body functioning all the time. Now, I have guys come into my clinic, and sometimes these guys come in and they're there because their wife told them to come in. And they're there because their wife said, you've got this shoulder pain, you need to see the doctor. So they'll come in for that. And they talk to me and they say, I don't really have a shoulder problem. I mean, it just hurts me when I use it. And if I don't use it, I'm fine. And I'll take an Aleve and it's all good. And so we have to talk. And I have to, I don't want to complicate things. But you're supposed to be able to use your shoulder. Like you're supposed to be able to use your shoulder and not have pain. You're supposed to be able to use your body and not need drugs. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's not just like if we cover up the pain, it's all gone. So health is about having all the parts of your body functioning properly, and if they do, your body heals. Does this make sense to everybody?
Yep.
We good so far? So what heals the body? What do you guys think? Your body has an innate intelligence. Your body is innately smart, innately. So we go all the way back to the beginning. 2 half cells come together and make one unique cell. And that one cell, on its own accord, it divides into 2, 4, 8, 100 cells, all on its own. And some of those cells become nerve, others become muscle, others become bone, all on its own. Your doctor didn't do it. There's no medication that did that. Your mother didn't do it. You did it all on your own accord. Am I right? Okay? So the power that made the body is the same power that heals the body. And it does not make a mistake. If we ever have symptoms, it's because something got into that body that offended it in some way, forcing it to act and function differently out of survival. And this is the mindset we have to make you healthy. Because if you have high blood pressure, there's some reason the body needs to raise your blood pressure. Maybe you've got some aluminum toxicity that's making the heart beat weak and you can't get blood to the brain. And until that's gone, your body's going to raise your blood pressure. But we're sitting here saying we're just going to pounce that blood pressure back down and not try to figure out why the body wanted it to go high. So this is the bigger picture. We have to understand the body, first thing we have to understand is the body is innately intelligent, and everything that it does, it's doing for a reason. So when somebody comes in and their numbers are off, right? You have high blood glucose and high blood pressure and high cholesterol, all these things. Somebody comes in, they're very unhealthy. If we put them on the medications and get all of their blood tests looking normal, they're still unhealthy. Does that make sense? We get all of their symptoms gone and they're still unhealthy. They will still die earlier, but they'll die with lower blood pressure because they're on the med. And that is what the studies show. So having health means we take somebody, and even if the blood tests don't look perfect, their body is functioning exactly as it should. That's what health is. So let's move on. This is what we're going to go through today. What is diabetes? Why does it matter? Even if your blood tests look normal, why does that matter? We're going to talk about that. We're going to go through more of the bigger picture, and then what can we do to return back to normal? So, this is diabetes. Diabetes is a condition where your blood sugar goes high for too long, and your body can't bring it back down into normal ranges. In this graph, you see the high line and the low line, and your blood sugar fluctuates throughout the day. It goes up and down throughout the day. Now, when you eat food, it forces your blood sugar up. And your body has something that then lowers blood sugar. Anybody know what that is? Insulin. The drugs lower your blood sugar. So insulin is the tool that lowers blood sugar, okay? But there's more things that will increase your blood sugar. If you look at this, growth hormone increases blood sugar. Adrenaline increases blood sugar. Cortisol and glucagon, these things, all of those things increase your blood sugar, but we have one tool that decreases it, and it's insulin. That's the one mechanism that does it. And so the medical field looks at insulin as the solution to diabetes, because insulin lowers the blood pressure. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Kind of makes sense. The only problem with that is insulin is it's a little bit like smoking cigarettes. And when you smoke cigarettes your first time, it takes 1 or 2 cigarettes before you have a buzz or it calms you down. But after a few months or years, you need more cigarettes, right? Because you're desensitized to it. So your body goes through something called insulin resistance, where the insulin you have is no longer working. Your body is not sensitive to it anymore. And so if your body becomes insulin resistant, then it doesn't matter that you have insulin, the blood sugar is still going to go high. Does this make sense? Okay, so that's called insulin resistance. And this is where the focus of medicine is around diabetes. So I want to talk about what that causes. So insulin causes weight gain. Okay, diabetics gain weight, but insulin is what causes weight gain. It's not even the diabetes, it's the insulin. So the therapies that we use are designed around pushing more insulin, but they actually create weight gain in the long run. So you're 3 to 4 times more likely to gain weight when you have diabetes. And it's not the diabetes' fault. It's really the insulin that's causing that. Heart attack or stroke, you're about 4 times more likely to have a heart attack or stroke if you have diabetes. Now, the truth is, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, but they did a study, a huge study, and what they found is when you lower that blood sugar with medication, it does not change your risk for dying from a heart attack or a stroke. They tested thousands of people, thousands. They lowered their blood sugar with the meds, and it did not change the risk of dying from a heart attack or stroke. Is that profound or not? Like, that's a big deal. And it's because if you don't find the underlying cause of this problem, your body's still sick, you just have normal blood tests. Neuropathy, has anybody heard of neuropathy? Raise your hand if you have. About 70% of diabetics have neuropathy. And this is a condition where you either can't feel your feet, or your feet are burning, or they're painful, neuropathy in your hands or your feet. And the reason this happens is this high blood sugar, it damages all of these tissues. And the most delicate tissues are out in the periphery. So your toes and your fingers and your eyes and your kidneys, they're the first to go because of the damage of this high blood sugar. So neuropathy is a condition where the nerve endings are dying in your fingers and in your toes, and it can be debilitating for people. But one that is even worse than that is the vascular problem. So your arteries and your veins out in your hands and feet, they actually break down and degenerate. You actually get ulcers. You've heard of diabetic ulcers? 1 in 12 diabetics lose something. They lose a toe. They lose a foot. 1 in 12. That's a lot. You know, if you lose a toe, it costs like $14,000 to have a toe amputated. But your insurance covers it, so that's okay, right? No, right? No, it's not okay. It's $38,000 to have a foot amputated, but your insurance covers it. That doesn't make it okay, does it? Because all of those people, they would pay $38,000 more to get their foot back. So most of us are in a position where if we put some energy and effort into this now, before it becomes a problem, we can prevent the problem. But you do have to invest something into your health. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. You have to be proactive at it. Eye disease, the #1 reason for blindness is diabetes in this country. The #1 reason for dialysis is diabetes. You know dialysis, you go and you have to sit on this machine for 3 hours. And if you want to go and visit a family for the holidays, you have to find a dialysis center over there. And you have to get transportation. So half your day is spent away from the family getting on dialysis. I mean, this takes like 3 hours out of your day to be on dialysis. And guess what? You can lose 90% of your kidney function without one single symptom before the first symptom arrives. And of course, it's a burden on your life and a burden on your family. And last of all, of course, nobody wants this, right? I mean, you want to be there for your kids and your grandkids. I don't have grandkids, but I hear they're pretty cool, even better than kids. And you want to be there for them. So this is something that we want to get ahead of the game on. All right, so I want to go through some diabetes myths, and then I want to tell you what can we do to empower ourselves so we don't get this condition. Okay, so the first myth, and this is good news. The first myth is that diabetes always gets worse. Well, I will tell you, the CDC, the Centers of Disease Control, actually says it is preventable and controllable. And I will take it one step further because I've been treating diabetics for 15 years now. It is reversible. Diabetes can be turned backwards. It absolutely can. But let me be clear on this. I can't reverse your diabetes. There's no magic pill that can reverse your diabetes. Your doctor can't reverse your diabetes, but somebody can. Who? You can do it. You can, and you may need some guidance, but you can do it. Myth number 2, diabetes is genetic. You just have to live with it. You guys heard of this before? You know, if genetics is all there is, just throw in the towel. Why are we here? But it's not all genetic. Genetics does play a role. It plays about 3 to 5% of a role in diabetes. The other 95%, you know what it is? Lifestyle. Lifestyle trumps genetics every single time. Okay, diabetes myth number 3. As long as you take the drugs, everything will be okay. Now at this point, do we know that that's not true? This study they did was just profound. Columbia University did this study, and they printed it in the New England Journal of Medicine, and the New York Times picked it up and did an article on it. And they tested, 4,000 people. And 4,000 people they tested, they lowered their blood sugar numbers. It didn't change the risk of heart attack or stroke, death. Didn't change it at all. So then they said, which totally floored them, because they thought for sure that that should change that risk factor, but it didn't. So then they looked at other factors. They lowered triglycerides and cholesterol. They took people with high cholesterol, put it back to normal with drugs. It did not change the risk of death from heart attack or stroke. Then they looked at blood pressure, did the same thing. It did not change the risk. Then they said, maybe we need to do all of these at once. So they used medications and they lowered triglycerides, cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar, all of it with the meds, and it did not change the risk of heart attack or stroke deaths. That's profound. because we're still using those tools today for people with this chronic illness. But again, if you change your lifestyle, you can change the outcome. So, looking back on this chart here, what is the one thing that lowers blood sugar? Insulin. But there's a few other things on this board here. I'm sure you're wondering, because the board is right in front of you. There's a few things that increase blood sugar that we should probably take a look at, right? See all the arrows at the bottom? You have adrenaline, cortisol, glucagon. So let's take a look at some of those. You know, if your blood sugar goes too low, it could be a crisis there. So your body needs something to push your blood sugar back up. And that's what those things do. If you dip down, those hormones will kick it back up for you. Now, adrenaline is in place because when you're under stress, your body needs more blood sugar. Does that make sense? So think back if you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, your adrenaline rolls because you need blood sugar to get it to your brain. And that's what the mechanism is for. But what we're dealing with in our lifestyles today is chronic stress. We have lots of stress in our lifestyle. And the stress raises cortisol and it raises adrenaline. And sometimes that stress just stays for a long time. And so let's look at that kind of stress. There's 3 types of stress. Anybody list one type of stress?
Positive.
Being a pastor. And we call that emotional stress. Emotional stress is one kind of stress. Another kind of stress is physical stress. What's the third kind of stress?
Psychological stress.
Psychological. I put that under the same as emotional, psychological. Third one's the hardest. A lot of people don't think about this. It's chemical stress. Chemical stress. That's a stress that's lasting. Because when you're constantly exposed to chemicals, your body's constantly stressed about that. So the first thing I want to talk about is physical stress. Why do I talk about stress? Because everybody's dealing with it. And when you have these stressors, they cause your body to do different function in order to survive. This is what causes chronic illness. Chronic illness is a condition where your body is not functioning optimally. And what causes that is some kind of stressor gets in your system, forces your body to do different types of action to survive. That's what leads to chronic illness. So this is one of them, physical stress. Now, if you have chronic pain, that's a chronic physical stress. If you have knee pain, back pain, hip pain, every time you move and you have pain, what does your brain think? It thinks danger, it thinks something's going wrong, it thinks ouch. And because of that, it increases your stress hormones. For some people, it increases cortisol. The body knows what it's doing all the time. And there are some people whose blood sugar numbers will never get better until we handle old injuries, until we fix the pain syndrome, until we fix the physical stress. So I'm a chiropractor by training, and in chiropractic, this is one of the first things we look for is physical stress. Once you handle the physical stress, the body now can decrease the cortisol. But the second thing I want to point out is chemical stress. We have a lot of chemicals in our environment. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, think about your food supply. Almost everything is sprayed with what? Pesticides, insecticides, right. So we're sprayed with those things. The water, is the water contaminated?
Yes.
It's very contaminated. I know you would think that your tap water is clean, but the truth is there's lots of toxic residue in the tap water, and we drink that and we shower in that tap water. And you have makeups and cosmetics and the laundry detergents you use. We have all these smells, all of these fragrances that we use. And all of those they're toxic. They really are. I mean, if it were just one thing like your tap water, your body could deal with it. But when it's all of these things, it's a cumulative effect. You've heard of genetically modified foods? Mm-hmm. Yeah, these things are very toxic, but so many of the food that we get at the grocery store is this. And so this increases, and it increases the stress in your body. Now, your body is designed to get rid of all of that. So that's the good news. Your body's designed to be able to detoxify, get all of that stuff out of you, but if it accumulates beyond what your body can handle, that's when the stress starts causing cortisol problems. So what do we do with that? We just optimize your detoxification capabilities. Biochemical stress. So this deals with food, right? The foods that we eat sometimes give us biochemical stress. Of course, if you're eating things high in sugar, well, that's going to increase your blood sugar. But some of these foods, they have so much food coloring and food dyes and corn syrup, and they have all these ingredients, like the genetically modified ingredients, and these things are stressful for us to eat. And that stress can increase your blood sugar. Here's one that people don't always think about. You know anybody that deals with acid reflux, GERD, you eat a nice salad and your stomach bloats up like a balloon? Like, these are digestive stressors. And believe it or not, a lot of people have this digestive stress, which means every time they eat, their blood sugar goes up. Even if they don't eat sugar, their blood sugar goes up because their digestive system can't handle the food that you just ate. Okay, so I want to take a few minutes now and talk about the biggest thing, the biggest stressor that we're dealing with, which is the food industry. And the food industry, it's big business, yes? And big business wants to raise what?
Profits.
Profits. And they want to decrease
Expenses.
expenses. That's right, exactly. That's what all business wants to do that. But big business does that. And in the food industry, the biggest expense that exists is spoilage. The food spoils. You know, if you're making big pens, a pen can last for 20 years. But when you're making food, the food can spoil. And so if you're big business food and you're trying to sell your food to 48 or 50 states, well, you have to stop food from spoiling. And here's the problem we get from that. This is a kernel. This is a grain kernel right here. And this grain here is full of nutrients. It has bran, it has vitamin E, vitamin C, it has fats, phytonutrients, carbohydrates, all sorts of things. This kernel has everything you need, not only to digest it, but to absorb the nutrients and rebuild your body. Your body rebuilds itself with vitamins, minerals, and proteins. And that has everything you need to do that. The only thing you have to do is prepare it properly. So if you have grains, you soak the grains or you ferment the grains, and that's going to make all those nutrients available to you. But what the food industry does is they actually take all of that nutrition and take it away. They take it out of the bran because that's what causes the spoiling. Food spoils because of the nutrition in the food. Have you guys ever seen the McDonald's, they have the Big Mac and you leave it on your counter for 6 months and it doesn't change because there's literally no nutrition in it. It doesn't change at all. And unfortunately, that's what we're doing with our food supply, is we're taking the nutrients out of it so that it won't spoil for a very long time. Well, that means this. For you to break that food down, you need enzymes and nutrients to break it down to use it. If they take all of those enzymes and nutrition out of that grain, when you eat that grain, where are you going to get the nutrients you need to use it? It's going to come from your own reserves. You will supply those nutrients. So when you eat these processed foods, and that's what it is, it's processed foods. This is where you get the pasta, the breads, the grains, the cereals. When you eat those processed foods, they take more from you than they give you. Because you have to supply the nutrients to break it down and use it. It's very, very interesting. They did a study on mice, set them up into 3 different groups. The first group, they fed the mouse regular mouse food. The second group, they fed them cereal. And the third group, they fed them the cereal box. They basically fed them cardboard. Guess which group died first? The last mouse died from the cereal group, the same day the first mouse died from the box. But here's what's interesting. The group of mice that died from the box, they died from starvation. But the mice that died from the cereal died of pathology. They're the ones that got the illness and the sickness. Why? Because when they ate that food, it robbed them of the nutrients they need. Their body had to do something different to survive, and it ended up with pathology. So when we eat these foods, we get the diseases that we're dealing with. We call these anti-nutrients because they take more from you than they deliver to you. But this, this is the food industry. You've got all of these, it's a marketing industry is what it is, You've got the low salt and the fat-free, and buy this because there's no cholesterol, so it's heart healthy. There's all these marketing gimmicks around these foods. You've got Rice Krispies. You pour your milk in your cereal and the cereal talks to you. Snap, crackle, pop. You've got all these marketing tools. Milk, it what? Milk, it does a body good, right? I mean, these are commercials for 20 years ago, and we're still thinking about it today. But all of these foods are anti-nutrients. Like, they all take more from you than they give you. But this is what our diet should look like, which is actually quite appetizing. Am I wrong? This looks very, very good. And I'll tell you, that one in the center there, that big hunkin' steak, that will do you more good than you'll ever realize. The experts are all telling you to stop the oil, stop the fat, stop the red meat. And yet, we have more heart disease. We have more cancer. We have more stroke. We have more cholesterol. So I'm telling you, if we get back to eating real food, your body has a chance to heal and reverse these things. But it's got to be real food. We have to stop the processed foods. This is something that you can start tomorrow, and it will help you. Now, some people are advanced enough in a disease state where we also need to do certain therapy. But this is step one. Like, you can't get past, if you don't do step one, changing the diet, any other treatments that we give you won't help you. So this is number one. And it's not a bad solution. I mean, I'd eat any of those foods, except the avocado. I'm not a fan of the avocado.
I like avocados.
I know, it starts a war every time I say that. Nobody can believe it. Okay, so little review. When your blood glucose rises and you can't control it, that's diabetes. Now, this happens because either you can't make enough insulin or the insulin you have no longer works. It's called insulin resistance. But now we have to understand that if we're eating processed foods, now you don't even have the nutrient resources to use the food. You don't have the resources to repair arteries. You don't have the resources to repair breakdown in your system. So this will cause downstream problems. It causes weight gain. It causes sleep problems, male hormone problems, female hormones with the night sweats and the hot flashes. It causes digestive problems. I want to spend a couple minutes talking about testing for diabetes. I have people come in that have normal test results, but I can tell that they don't have normal blood sugar. Okay, so there's all kinds of signs of blood sugar problems. You can present with symptoms of blood sugar issues. Your test results may be normal though. You see, so think of a person who, here's the range. The range is between 75 and 100. And when your blood sugar numbers are over 100, then you can be diagnosed with diabetes. But what if your numbers are 95? Does that mean everything is normal?
That's what they tell you.
That's what they tell us, right? What if they're 96 or 98? You think about, if you go in and you're 92, your blood sugar is 92, and then 2 years later it's 94, and then 2 years later it's 98. We can see the big picture, can't we? We know where this is heading. And that's when we need to change the lifestyle to turn it around. So there's many reasons why your blood tests can be normal, and yet you still have the problem. And we need to have a holistic look at you in order to properly help you. So here are a list of tests for diabetic testing. And you'll be familiar with the first two, glucose and hemoglobin A1C. Those are quite obvious. Now there are advanced markers out there. There's one called glycomark, fasting C-peptide and fasting insulin. This will tell you how the blood sugar functions throughout a day. But these other ones are so beneficial. Triglycerides and cholesterol. I can spot a blood sugar problem miles away just by looking at your cholesterol and triglycerides. I can look at your patterns of carbon dioxide, sodium, and potassium, and I can see these problems coming from a long way away. You can look at the patterns of uric acid and see these things coming from a long way away. They may not all be high, but if they all are giving a certain pattern, then we know we're dealing with this problem. We also can look at your symptoms. If you eat lunch and fall asleep, it's a blood sugar problem. If you get shaky if you miss a meal, it's a blood sugar problem. Anybody have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep? Those are potential blood sugar problems. And we can see these patterns, and so if we do a good analysis on you, if we take good history and do a good analysis with you, we can see what's going on. Sometimes I don't even need blood tests. I already know what we need to do. The other thing we have to look at is this. When is your glucose high? Some people's glucose are only high in the last part of the day. So if you get up 8 o'clock in the morning, you fasted all night long, and then you go to your doctor and you get your blood test and the glucose comes back normal, all that really tells you is that when you fast for 12 hours and take your blood test at 9 o'clock in the morning, it's normal. But it doesn't tell you what's happening for the rest of the day. So here are the other questions. When is your glucose high? Is it high all the time? Well, if it is, your morning test will find it. But if your glucose is high just in the afternoon, you won't find it. If your glucose is high after meals or only after dinner, you won't find it. If your glucose is only high when you're stressed or on your drive to work, you won't find it. So if we really want to help you, we have to look at you as a whole person. Look at your symptoms, look at your history, look at your blood test as a whole, then we can collectively see what it is that's going on with you. So here is what the holistic assessment looks like. The first thing, you want to assess the entire clinical picture of a person. We'll look at all of the symptoms of an individual person. And then we look into your history. What kind of exposures have you had in your life? Do you have trouble getting rid of toxins? We can ask questions that clue us into this. What's your quality of sleep? Are there symptoms of hormone imbalance? Symptoms do you have muscular weakness? So all of these give us clues about what's going on with you and what we can do to help. And then from there, then we can put together a therapy that will help you reverse the condition, that will give your body the resources it needs to reverse and fix the problem. So what do? The first thing is we remove any offenders that are there. Some people have foods they're allergic to that they're not aware of. We remove those offenders to give your body a chance to heal. We give you the proper nutrition to restore function to your organs. And then we address the old injuries that you carry around. The body itself is holistic. Sometimes if you have an old injury and you don't treat it, your body will never fix your diabetes problem until we address the old injuries. And so you do this with neurologic rehab, musculoskeletal rehab, and spinal and joint alignment. And this becomes now a truly holistic treatment for any person. And I think that's all that I have. So are there any questions that you have for me? I'm prepared today to answer any questions. Some people, when they hear a talk like this, they actually want to take action for themselves. And they say, hey, I would like to improve my health. Is that anybody in this room? Well, if you're interested in that, then I'll give you an opportunity that you can come and meet with me. And in fact, I'll go through this really quickly here. When you come and meet with me in the office, the first thing we do is a consultation. We go and talk through your history and all of your symptoms, and we ask some probing questions. We want to figure out your background. The second thing we do is an exam. Now this exam is to tell us what direction to go with you. It's not a full-scale exam, but it's enough to tell us where we need to treat you. And then after that, we do a report of findings telling you what's wrong and what the best options are for you to help. And then you decide what you want to do. There's no obligation on that. You can decide whatever you want to do. But that process is $135. So that's for the consultation and the exam and the report of findings. Now, when I come and give a talk like this, you've had to listen to me for an hour, and so I give you an incentive for this. You have a reward for this. I don't know if I can pay you, no, but I can collect less from you. And that's what I do, that's what I offer. So for you, if you want to take advantage of this, it's $85. You can come and have your consultation and your exam, and I'll tell you what I found, and I'll give you options for treatment. And there's no obligation, you can do whatever you want at that point. If you have a spouse here that you also want to bring, the spouse then would be 65. So the first person is 85, the spouse or family member is 65. And this is if you want to get yourself healthy. But I will tell you this, like if you're truly interested in helping yourself, that's who this is for. But be prepared because insurance is probably not going to cover the care that you need. It will be an investment out of pocket. It's just the nature of the beast because they pay for drugs and surgery. But that's not what we're dealing with. We're actually working with you to make your health better. So if you're interested with that, we can set you up with that today. But you do have to schedule today. You do have to schedule in order to get that rate. So now, I'll open the floor for some questions for a few minutes. So,
you know, you went through the whole explanation about, you know, insulin and that we're trying to band-aid our health. Let's say you hear that that the medical system wants to give you something to protect you from, you know, COVID or diseases or something like that. Why is it that why is it that somebody that has diabetes or somebody like that is a worse chance of dying because of diseases? And why would the healthy be less? I mean, is that just another environmental thing? I mean, is it because disease is like your body has to react to an environmental, but if you are already at a risk from diabetes, has that ever occurred to understand that aspect of it?
so do I understand your question right? When you have diabetes or one of these illnesses, why are you more prone to death or serious illness from exposure to COVID?
Or disease,
or any other disease? Well, I'll say this, diabetes doesn't kill anybody. It's the effects of diabetes that kill people. So diabetes causes so much damage to the body. And so your immune system is handcuffed when you have diabetes. The inflammation in your body is so high that that next straw is the one that's going to kill the camel's back. So many people in America had the highest rates of death from COVID out of all these other countries because we have so much chronic illness, because we have so much diabetes. We were right to die of the next infection that we got. You know, it could have been COVID, it could have been the common cold. The common cold kills a lot of people with this chronic illness. But that kind of points right back to the same discussion we had earlier where you can normalize those blood sugar levels. Like most diabetics are on meds to decrease their blood sugar back into normal, and yet it doesn't reduce your risk for death from other exposures because your body is so weak because of that disease.
Daniel, I'd like you to finish your story about, you know, yourself, about you said you were so tired and everything. I mean, what did you do to yourself to make yourself feel better?
So he asked me, well, what did I do once I found out I was so sick, and how did I fix myself? And it was a long journey. It was a long, difficult journey. And I started going to other doctors and listening to what they had to say. And I learned all of this whole concept that the body is designed to heal itself if you get rid of what's interfering it. And so I changed what I ate. And I looked at landmark studies that nobody talks about. Like you may have heard of Weston Price. Here's a guy who traveled the world and studied these cultures, who routinely lived to be 120 years old with great health. And he said, what did they eat? What did they avoid? And I ate like that. And then I did other tests to see, was I exposed to metals and glyphosate and chemicals, and I optimized those detox capabilities. And I went to various doctors who had certain extraordinary skills for finding food sensitivities. And I eliminated those things. And it was a slow, steady process. I don't have any way of proving this, but I believe that mine came from vaccines. I believe that's where it came from. For a number of reasons I believe that, but you know, when you get vaccinated, the vaccines, they have a metal to cause irritation. They have aluminum or they have mercury to cause irritation. And that can cause your immune system to react to anything, but then not have the strength to fight off an infection. And so here I had chronic virus issues my whole life. So that's what I think it was.
We get a book from Weston Price, and it's got a lot of useful information.
They're great. I would definitely join the organization.
Yeah.
Yes. Ma'am?
So, having diabetes and I recently had a mild stroke, you know, they're saying from that, I don't have AFib or anything. I mean, am I just like sunk, or can something like this, can I reverse it even at this point?
I'm sorry to hear about the stroke. I know that how debilitating that can be. You absolutely can make strides to reverse this. There are therapies that do help rehabilitate the nervous system for strokes. It's neurologic rehab, and it's the right specific kind of rehab. So for starters, you absolutely can work on fixing the blood sugar, which is going to be the foundation. But then there's neurologic therapy that can help reverse some symptoms of the stroke. And there is hope, without a doubt.
I've come pretty far. I'd say I'm probably 80% better. You know, still some, I play a lot of music, and it's like, what was that for? You know, but I'm doing okay, but I'm thinking, can I like reverse this and prevent this another?
Prevent it from happening again. Keep going. Don't give up.
No.
It sounds like you're doing great work. Kudos.
Yeah.
Great job.
All right.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you talked about diet and food. How does exercise and keeping busy fit into this whole thing with diabetes?
So she talked about how does exercise play a role in diabetes. And exercise is very important. And I would say that with exercise, while walking is a good thing, to me, walking is just kind of like living. You know, it's just what you do when you live. I would say exercise needs to be a little bit more intense than that. So if you can get yourself where your heart rate is going up a bit for an extended enough time and then come down, or doing things like lifting something fairly heavy for you, doing some kind of weight training. You shouldn't be going crazy on the weights, but some kind of weight training is probably the best thing. So here's one of the issues with diabetes. Your body is burning sugar. That's all it can do. It can only burn sugar because it's in this diabetic state. Well, your muscles, they're the ones that are your muscle conditioning. If you fix the muscle conditioning, your body will lower blood sugar because all that sugar circulating through your blood will get into your muscles will burn it, and you'll bring those sugars down. So doing weight training like resistance training is probably one of the most powerful tools for exercise for impacting diabetes.
You explain what A1C is and what affects it?
So what is hemoglobin A1C? Hemoglobin A1C looks at your red blood cells, and it sees how saturated is it with sugar. Red blood cells live like 3 or 4 months, and so if they're saturated with sugars, you can kind of figure out what your average blood sugar has been over 3 months. So some people only get high blood sugar at night. You'll never see it at the doctor's office, but a hemoglobin A1C could give you a clue about your average blood sugar over time. It's just another tool.
Vitamins and supplements, what is your opinion?
That's a good question. It's almost like you're planted here. What do I think about vitamins and supplements? I think that's a great question because I actually have a very strong opinion, which I want to get into. So here, this is so important to understand. Vitamins grow in food. Yes, food is living. And so we eat living food. Now we may cook it, but we eat living food. And vitamins are like living complexes. When they're in food, they're part of like hundreds of things are in there. Now, the vitamin industry goes into a lab and they try to make a chemical that looks like what's in food, but it's impossible. It's impossible to duplicate that. It can't be done. So most of the vitamin supplement industry, you're taking these like shadows of real vitamins, and so their effect is always limited, always. Now you can use it sometimes As a doctor, I'll use some synthetic vitamins for creating a certain outcome on a temporary, I'll use it temporarily. But what you really want is vitamins made from food. So they grow the food and they extract out the water and the fiber, and everything that's left is that vitamin concentrate. That's how you nourish a body and refeed a body. So vitamins can be very helpful, but you have to know what you're doing it for and how long you're going to use it. And at some point, you need to stop and use real food. One more.
I always read that you cannot eat enough food to obtain all the nutrients.
Okay, so she says, you can't eat enough food to get all the nutrients that you need. And so it's true, the soil is very depleted. And so we're growing all this food on depleted soil. And so the fruits and vegetables we eat, the meat that we eat, they're all depleted. And so we eat that food and then it doesn't give us the amount of nutrients that we need. And that's very, very true. And that's why, in a sense, you do need supplements that are made from food. And ultimately, that's what you need. But there's a lot of companies out there that purport to make these types of supplements, and some of them are good, and some of them are not so good. Some of them have really good marketing plans. So you have to be leery of some of them. But a whole food supplement is the better supplement for many people.
Along with what Mike was saying, but it's cholesterol. I always hear that people always say that it's genetic.
No, cholesterol is, I would say probably 80% of the cholesterol cases that I see are directly tied to blood sugar problems. And because when you have high blood sugar, your body increases cholesterol and triglycerides. It's like a natural reaction. Yeah. It's actually, I've seen very few cases where it's truly genetic.
Diabetes?
What's that?
Oh, cholesterol.
Cholesterol, yeah. Yeah. Cholesterol is so changeable. And you can watch, it's just amazing. You can have a person with cholesterol at 285 and you put them on the right kind of a eating plan, and over the weekend, it comes back down to normal. It's wild. Yeah, cholesterol.
Well, they like to
very
give
changeable.
statins for that, or what?
I'm sorry?
Statins for that? I mean,
Well, statin is a drug that lowers cholesterol, but at the expense of your muscles and your nerves. Like all these drugs will change chemically, they'll change things, but you will suffer an expense because of that. And so people get muscle pain or loss of coordination who are on statin drugs because it impacts the nervous system and those muscles. So long term, you have lower cholesterol, but you do not live better on statin drugs. The interesting thing about statins, cholesterol levels used to be normal at 300. 300 was considered normal until Lipitor came out. And then it dropped to 250. And after enough people got on Lipitor, they dropped it to 225. Now it's at 180. They just keep lowering the levels of it. You look at blood pressure drugs,
Same thing.
they're now wanting to put people whose blood pressure is normal, they want to put people on those drugs to prevent them from getting high blood pressure. So they'll push it too low to prevent it from going too high.
Is
That's
there
the
a way?
mindset.
Is there a way to purge yourself off of something? Like, let's say you've taken statins and you're also on, insulin, and you're all. How does the person? Because I think we have a parishioner here that stopped taking maybe their statins, and they had to have angioplasty. They almost died because they quit taking it.
Yeah, well, you definitely need to work with a professional to do it properly. Right? You have to work with a professional to get off these drugs. So let me say, I am not saying to stop the medications. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there's a way we need to support the body so it functions well and then strategically reduce those meds as it's appropriate. Sometimes you need those meds as crutches. The problem is when we rely on crutches for decades, that's when we have an issue. So we can repair the body and systematically take the crutches away. And that's the approach.
Considering diabetes is more like a metabolic condition, do you really need to go on a keto diet to kind of reset your body, or no?
She said, well, diabetes is metabolic, so do you need to go on keto to reset yourself? You don't need to go on keto. There's a lot of people misunderstand keto. They think that keto, paleo is all kind of the same thing, and it's not. Keto is a very extreme diet where you're only eating fat. Carnivore is an extreme diet where you're only eating meat. Vegan is an extreme diet where you're never eating meat. There's all these extremes, and some of them are useful for a time, but you don't have to go keto to fix diabetes. Don't have to do that. It's, like I said, it can be extreme, and you shouldn't be keto for months and months. You should have it for a defined amount of time and then stop. So I'll take two questions. There's two more questions or so, and then we'll move on. Yes, sir.
When I looked at the chart with your insulin, it was going up and down as you were eating and other problems that could cause it. So you want to stay within that range between 75 and 100. If you ate smaller but regular meals, wouldn't it try and keep it a lot more steadier? Because, you know, if you keep it steadier, wouldn't that be more healthful that way?
It's a good question. So he's saying, hey, we want to keep it between 75 and 100. Should we eat small meals but more frequently so it stays steady? So the 75 to 100, that's normal for fasting. Your fasting blood sugar. And in honesty, it should be like 80 to 85. But 75 to 100 are the parameters that are used. When you eat food, it's normal to go up to 160 or 180. That's normal. You should bring it down relatively smoothly and relatively quickly. So your blood sugar does go up and down over time. The problems are when it spikes way too high or it spikes way too low and your body is erratic with this blood sugar. That's when you start having problems. So you don't have to eat all day long small amounts to try to keep it steady. You should eat a full meal and then stop eating for hours. And then eat another full meal and stop eating for hours. So we're not constantly eating, forcing ourselves to digest food constantly. That's hard on the body. You want to eat and then stop. And then eat.
Don't stop.
Yeah, don't stop forever. Yes.
Once you have insulin resistance, can it be reversed?
Can insulin resistance be reversed? Absolutely. Yes, it can. And I'll tell you this, if you're injecting insulin, it's a lot harder than it. It's very hard to get off the insulin. If you're not on insulin yet, you can reverse that insulin resistance. Absolutely. And sometimes it can happen really quickly, but other times there's a lot of factors involved and you just have to be persistent. But absolutely, yes. Your body's designed to heal itself. That's the great, amazing thing about how we're created. It's designed to fix itself and go back to normal. You just have to give the body what it needs and remove what's getting in the way. So we have to figure out what that is for each individual. And when we help you do that, then your body will start to go back to normal. You'll sleep better. You'll have more focused energy throughout the day. The weight will come off. You'll slim down. You'll just feel good. Your joints will hurt less. You'll just feel freer.
Okay, one last question from the past.
Father.
Whenever you get diagnosed, there's a recommendation that you go to the local health system and they have a class. Should I take the class or should I go to you?
It's almost like you were planted here. The father said, hey, you get diagnosed with diabetes and then they give you a diet class and a health class. So what's the value of the health class? Unfortunately, I think it's relatively harmful. I think that the advice that they give is not good. My dad, when he had his heart attack, they gave him the diabetic diet, and it was pop, orange juice, a sticky bun, a couple eggs. And like I looked at his plate, and over half of it were carbohydrates and sugars. There's a lot of things they allow on that diet that's really not well. If you study, and you don't have to study this, but if you study Weston Price diet, you will be on track. But you don't have to study it. I'm more than happy to put you on the right track.
What did you call that diet?
Weston Price.
Weston Price, never heard of
Yeah. Well, it's not a diet, but Weston Price is this person who studied all of these cultures. He's a doctor from the 30s and the 40s. And what he had to say and had to offer is invaluable. But that will put you on the right track. So, thank you so much. This is what I'd like to do. If you are interested in taking a step forward for you and figuring out what's going on and if we can help reverse what you're dealing with, I have a sheet over here with some time slots available. And I'll ask you, let's come meet me over here. Let's find the right time. Let's get you set up. I'll get you paperwork and whatnot. But thank you so much for being here. It's an honor, and let's do this again soon.